this is Justin Hummel from Powder King. Today we are going to take an in-depth look at the setup and recipe screen on our new EC200 control system. This screen will be used to input custom run parameters to optimize mill operations for your specific material need. The setup and recipe screen is accessed directly from the main menu. You will see it in the first column from the left, second button down. When you enter the setup and recipe screen, the first thing you will notice is the screen is divided into two sections. The top half of the screen is the mill setup editor, and the lower half is the mill recipes editor. The mill setup editor is used for manual entry of the machine run parameters. Mill recipe editors is where operators can create, save, and load custom run recipes. The recipe editor allows operators to store thousands of recipes to be recalled for later use. The use of the recipes helps operators to keep their optimum run parameters stored in one simple place, avoiding any questions or confusion as to what parameters work best with a particular material. Moving back up to the mill setup editor, we are going to go through all these fields one by one to help you get started. Just a reminder, this is what we consider manual setup. The data values entered in these color-coded fields will be the parameters the machine uses once you fire up the motors and start processing material. It is also important to mention the screen you are viewing right now is configured for a single mill machine. If you have a dual mill machine, you will see two mill setup sections labeled Mill 1 Setup, Mill 2 Setup. Now let's get started. Beginning on the left, we have the mill setup. The first value to set is the load percent. This value corresponds to the amount of amps you allow the motor to pull while running. The minimum value that can be entered here is 50% and the maximum value is 110%. To set the percent load, touch the box and enter the desired value on the numeric keypad that pops up. We are going to enter the value of 92%. When complete, press enter to close the keypad. Next is the temperature. This box is where you set your target grind temperature. For this example, we are going to go with 152 degrees Fahrenheit. Up next is the alarm. This value is your meltdown alarm temperature. Generally, we recommend setting this value approximately 10 to 20% greater than your target mill temperature. Here, we are going to set our alarm temp to 166 degrees Fahrenheit. Please note that our example here is in degrees Fahrenheit. However, depending on your preferences, these units can be configured for either Fahrenheit or Celsius. The final value is mill setup is vacuum. This value corresponds to the minimum amount of air pressure within the mill. The units used for this pressure value are inches of water. Here we are going to set the value to 1.2. With the mill setup parameters complete, the last step is to touch the Apply Setup button. This will apply your settings to the controls. Just a reminder, if you have a dual mill machine, you will have to set up your secondary mill before moving on to the blower setup. Next up is blower setup. In the blower setup, the first value to set is percent of airflow. This value corresponds to the volume of air you allow in the mill through the electronically controlled air dampener. 100% is all the way open and 0% is completely closed. For this example, we are going to set this to 82%. Next is vacuum minimum. This value is the minimum required pressure for the proper flow of powder through the system and proper cyclone operation. Note the units for pressure here are again in inches of water. We are going to set this to 3.0. Last is vacuum maximum. This value is the maximum allowable pressure for the proper flow of powder through the system and proper cyclone operation. Again, units are in inches of water and we are going to set this to 4.2. Now the blower setup parameters are complete, the final step is to touch the Apply Setup button to apply our settings to the controls. This concludes the manual setup process. At this point, we are essentially ready to start processing material. If we were to head over to the control screen, start up the motors, and begin grinding, the machine would operate within the parameters we just set. Now let's move on to the Mill Recipes Editor, located on the bottom half of the screen. Here, we are going to go step by step through how to create and save a new recipe in the controller. Then, how to recall and finally apply a previously saved recipe. To start off, you will notice there is one box highlighted yellow identified as recipe number. All the recipes you create and save are assigned a number. This number is how you will reference and recall your recipes for later use. To see the recipes we have already saved to this machine, touch the yellow box and input a number 1 through 999 and press enter. On this machine, we have 4 recipes stored. As we toggle through them, you will see the values in the fields change to those we previously saved. It is worth noting here that when starting out with a new material, it is best to first input your run parameters manually rather than creating a recipe. Throughout the first few thousand pounds of material you run, you will likely be making adjustments to your run parameters until you optimize your output. Once you have found the optimum run parameters that maximizes your output, then create and save a recipe with those settings. On the machine we are working from, the next available recipe number is 5. So we're going to start there. With the value 5 in the recipe number box, you can see that there are already some default values in the fields. For % mill load, mill temp, and mill alarm temp, the minimum allowed value is displayed. For blower, % air flow, the maximum value is displayed. So now let's assume you have run several thousand pounds of material through the machine and you have dialed in the parameters that optimize your output. To create your new recipe, start by giving it a name. Touch the box under the recipe name. A keyboard will appear on your screen. Here we recommend using the name of the material you are processing. For this example, we are going to name it HDPE. Touch enter when complete to close the keyboard. Now we are going to go through each field and enter the run parameters for the recipe. 80 for % load, 175 for mill temp, 225 for mill alarm temp, 3 for mill vacuum minimum, 100 for blower % airflow, 3 for blower vacuum minimum, and lastly 10 for blower vacuum maximum. With all the recipe data input, the final step is to save the recipe. At the bottom right of the screen, you will notice the Save Recipe Password box. To save the recipe, touch this box, input the number 1, and touch enter. By default, the passwords to save recipes is the number 1. When a recipe is successfully saved, you will see the green saved message in the blue box to the right. Just a quick note here, the passwords and uses for them is explained in greater detail in the maintenance screen video. Now we have successfully created and saved a new recipe. Nice job! The final thing to do is to recall and apply a saved recipe. On the machine we are working from, we now have 5 recipes saved. To recall a previously saved recipe, touch on the yellow recipe number box. Input the number you assigned to the recipe and touch enter on the numeric pad. If you don't remember exactly what number you assigned your recipe, we find it easy to start with 1 and continue moving through the recipes you have saved until you find the one you were looking for. This is where giving your recipe a good name is helpful, as it will help you recognize it quicker. The recipe we created for this example was number 5, so we are going to use this recipe setting. Once you have this recipe selected, touch the Apply Recipe button and you will notice the values on the upper part of the screen have changed to match your recipe. This concludes our explanation of the setup and recipe screen. Now you have all the information you need to input the run parameters manually and to create, save, recall, and apply recipes of your own. In the event you run into any questions, take a look at the help button at the top of the screen. The information here is a nice quick reference for the operator. If you have any questions or require additional assistance, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you for watching and have a great day.